When we come across a website which doesn't work in that way, it feels a bit weird, and we don't want people feeling weird when they're on your website.
Paul Green's
MSP Marketing
Podcast.
Let's start this week talking about a small marketing task that takes so little time to do, but has an absolutely massive impact. Now, we're talking about the order of items within your website's navigation. And you may not have put a huge amount of thought into that, but as I say, it's something that you can just tweak and play with in 30 seconds, depending which website technology you're using. In fact, it's going to take me longer to talk to you about it than it is for you to actually do it. But the order of your navigation does have an impact on people's expectations of your website and indeed how people use your website. You see, when websites first came along, we're talking kind of like the mid to late 90s here. And I just immediately had a memory in my head of being at work in a radio station that I used to work at in around about 96, 97. And we got an internet PC. It was the one PC in the building that was actually connected to the internet. And I remember us all going in, and I think we were using like Netscape Navigator. How old am I? Using that to actually go and, we were asking each other, where do we go? Which websites do we go to? And, back then, that was a time of immense experimentation. There were no kind of set standards for websites. Today, just on the verge of 2023, we are kind of in a much different place. And that, not to say that there isn't and shouldn't be lots of innovation with websites, but there are some things that are just done that way just because that's what people expect. For example, your logo in the top left-hand side of your website. Now, that just goes there. Maybe if you were some kind of experimental brand or some kind of cool, trendy marketing agency, you'd put the logo somewhere else. But for an MSP with a standard sales website, your logo goes at the top left. And when someone clicks or taps on that logo, what does it do? It takes them back to the home page. This is standard behavior from a website. And because we've all been using websites for 25 years, it's what we expect. And when we come across a website which doesn't work in that way, it feels a bit weird, and we don't want people feeling weird when they're on your website. The purpose of your website is to get them to feel like you are the people they can trust with their technology. So we want them feeling warm and comfortable and ready to move on and take the next step with you. We don't want them feeling slightly awkward or even, just feeling like things aren't quite right. That's exactly the opposite of how we want them to feel. It's why you don't want the navigation going down the left-hand side of your website. That's the navigation of 2010, 2005. On the verge of 2023, the navigation sits at the top. That's just one of those things that we don't experiment with. Now, in particular, what I want to talk about today is the order of the items in your navigation. Your navigation should be as uncluttered as possible. So if you have more than around about 4, 5, 6 things in that navigation, particularly if you start having lots and lots of sub menus, there's just too much in there. And sometimes, well, certainly with navigation, I believe less is more, and you can bring that back a little bit. The order is important as much as not having clutter is important. So you should have your logo on the left, and then you may choose to have the word home. Now, the home button does exactly the same as clicking on the logo. It takes them back to the home page. But there is a certain school of thought which says, an older generation, I'm not going to date dates or name ages here, but an older generation still appreciates and uses a home button. And remember, we want to make people feel comfortable. So if you have space for it in your navigation, put a home button up there. Now, I'm just going to jump to the other end of the navigation, the sort of the right-hand side, because there you need to have some very specific things. The final item on your navigation should always be contact us. Why? Because that's what people expect to see at the end of your navigation. And next to contact us, they expect to see about us. So you've got home on the left, you've got About Us and Contact Us on the far right. What goes in the middle? Well, that's where you've got a little bit of flexibility. I would argue that the next thing you should have after your home is services. Now, people don't really go onto your services pages. Well, they might go onto them, but they don't really read them. They're a bit boring, but they still need to be there. And for your website to be complete, you need to have those pages. Maybe then you'd have a blog section or a news section or some kind of a learning hub or something like that. Maybe you'd have other, like sectors, verticals that you work with, specific markets. Actually, I'd put that one next to the services. So you'd have home, services, specialities, and then you'd go into sort of your news, your blog, or your learning hub. You could have a testimonials page in there as well. I would put the testimonials between the blog and the About Us. You can see we've got a little bit of variance there of things that you can do. It doesn't really matter what the order of the middle things is, but what is most important is that you've got home on the left and you've got About Us and Contact Us on the right. Those things are fixed. So have a quick look at your website now. If you have got an easy to edit menu like a WordPress, it takes literally 30 seconds to log in and just move the order around on a WordPress site. Just have a quick juggle around. If you've got too many items and your navigation is cluttered, what you can do is you can put a little tool into your website to tell you, actually give you data on how people are using your website. There is a piece of software we use. It's called hotjar.com. There are other alternatives to it. Lucky Orange is another one that we've toyed with in the past, but we always come back to Hotjar. We have a paid account and that sits in our websites and it just watches and takes videos of what people are doing. In fact, it produces data sort of heat maps. So you can see literally where people's mouse cursors have been around the page and what they're clicking on and therefore what they're not clicking on. But you can also, as I say, you see anonymous videos. So you don't know who it is that's using your page, but you can see their behavior and what that does. So if you've got a really cluttered navigation and you're not quite sure which items to drop to make it less cluttered, go and put Hotjar in and within a few weeks you'll have a lovely heat map to show you what they're not clicking on. And guess what they're not clicking on you can remove from the nav or you can hide it in a sub menu or something. But make sure your navigation is exactly what will make people comfortable on your website. In fact, you can broaden that across every element of your website. If it doesn't make them feel comfortable and feel like you can be trusted, then it hasn't earned its place on your website.
Paul Green's
MSP Marketing
Podcast.